particular place. So we had a lot of discussion, debate on should we continue with this. We said initially there are going to be birth banks, there is going to be challenges, but I think it is better that in the long run, because this system is much more robust and much more reliable, so better we'll change for this particular system. So there is a standardization. Earlier, if you look at the standardization, there is no standardization as far as the capability maturity model is concerned. Each one actually adopted this one customization, which was given the maturity model and customized as required. The second thing was the CMM model, which was there in COBIT, did not use all the contents of COBIT 5, all the knowledge repository. It was derived from the contents from COBIT 5, but did not take all the contents. So there were a lot of gaps in between. Third, as I said, it helps in improving the reliability and repeatability of the process. And it also follows a standard process. And you can also repeat this particular process and use it. This explains why do we need to do it. Okay, let's go further. Now this gives you the differences between what is there 4.1 and 5. Now if you look at the titles, you have starting 0, this one non-existent, which is supposed to be 0, incomplete. Then you have 1 initial ad hoc, now it's called as performed. And earlier it was repeatable by intuitive, now it's called managed. Third, it was defined, now it's called established. Fourth, it was managed measurable, now it's called fourth is predictable. And fifth is optimized, now it's called optimizing. And each of them, as per the ISO standard, there are said to be certain attributes. Now for that particular process to have passed that, they should have conformed to that particular attribute. Which means, if you say that process is at that particular level 1, which means that process is being performed. Only when the process is being performed, then you can say you are at level 1. Whereas in the case of the earlier model, the assessment was whether that process was being performed, to what extent it was being performed. So if the process was documented, we could be at level 3. Okay. Now the assumption is if the process is being performed, first is whether the process is being performed. If a process is being performed complete to the satisfaction, then it's level 1 in the case of the PAM model. And then you start measuring the attributes, and then based on that you decide at what level you are. Let's look at the assessment overview. This gives you the structure of how an assessment is done. There are 3 key things which are required. 1, you need to have process reference model. Second, you need to have process. And third, there should be a measurement framework. And there is an assessment process through which the accredited trainers or assessors are trained so that they can follow that particular process based on which they can do an assessment. Similarly, there can be a self-assessment wherein professionals within the company or employees within the company can walk through this particular guide, use it and make a self-assessment as to where we are as far as that particular process is concerned. Let's have a quick understanding of how this is done. As far the assessment process is concerned, there is an initial input, and based on it, there has to be assessment process and there has to be output. And the roles and responsibility for this particular assessment process had to be clearly defined. This gives you a generic view of how an assessment is actually done. So first, let's have a look at the process reference model using COBIT 4.1. If you look at the structure, the contents of COBIT 4.1, they have been modified to ensure that they are in conformance with what is given in the requirements of 4.1. If you look at the contents of 4.1, they are not given in this particular structured way. So these contents were all reorganized for the purpose of process assessment model. Now I'll walk you through this 4.1, then we'll see how this could be applicable for 5 also. So you have a process ID, let's say DS1, then you have process name, purpose, outcome, then you have base practice which need to be followed. Based on the work products, the work products have got a particular number, have a description, and this, it also says to which are the supports, which are the processes which are supported. Then similarly you have got outputs which have a similar structure. Let's look at the distinction. First, purpose. What is given by the purpose? The high-level measurable objectives of performing the process and the likely outcomes of effective implementation of the process. This is what is defined as far as the purpose is concerned. Next, if you look at the outcomes, what is going to be achieved by implementing this particular process? there is an observable result of a process, an artifact or a significant change of state or the meeting of the specific constraint. This is what is given in the outcomes. And then you have the artifacts, which are actually the input and the output. If you look at the next stage, if you look at here, the process ID is given, the process name is given from the COBIT framework. Similarly, okay, there is slight alignment here. This is the control objectives. The control objectives are used for the purpose of making the description. The best practices came from actually from the activities which are given in the RACI chart. Similarly, the input-output documents which are given come out as the work products. In the case of COBIT 5, what is the distinction? Before we come, let's look at COBIT 5. So what is that which we need for process assessment? So if you see here, first is we need to have the purpose. Okay, let's look at where is it available in COBIT 5. Okay, this we're just giving a quick walkthrough of the process. Okay, if you look at the process, for each of the process, there is a process description, there is a process purpose statement. What does the process purpose statement say? What will be achieved by implementing that particular process is given the process purpose statement. Now, if you compare it here, this process purpose statement which was given in COBIT 5, COBIT 4.1 is directly mapped, is directly available as a process purpose statement. Okay. Similarly, if you look at the next one, outcomes. What are the outcomes? Then you had the best practices, then you have the work products. Process ID is already there. As far as the process name is concerned, we know there is a title. For example, in the case of COBIT 5, process name is given here. For example, APS01, manage the IT management framework. This gives you the process description. And then you have the enabler goals. Then you have the key management practices. Or these are also called as the best practices. And then you have the key management practices title given here. Now, if you look at the RACI chart which was there in 4.1 and 5, you find there are not key management practices, you had a set of activities. And these are not exactly mapped with what is there in the control objectives. So the process ID is readily available, the process name is available, and even the best practices are directly available. Okay. So if you look at the RACI chart, so you have the best practices readily available in COBIT 5. Similarly, the input-output. If you look at the input-output in COBIT 4.1, they are given at the process level. Whereas now if you look at COBIT 5, the input-output documents are available not at the process level, but at the practice level. If you look at the structure, for each processes, there are a set of management practices. For each of the management practices, it has a set of input and it has a set of output.